Oh well. Alright. Good morning time, good evening time, good afternoon time, whatever the case may be in your part of the world, you know how we do. Uh, Today, we're gonna have a little discussion. Uh, Hold on. Well, yeah. Anyway, about something else that has kind of like been topic of discussions lately, and that's battery fires and BMSs, and you know what they actually do. Do they protect you? Uh, Disconnecting them, does that make it so you're unprotected? How much, faith should we put in BMSs to protect us anyway? Yada yada yada. And what are some telltale signs that your battery is having problems, and how to pay attention to the warning signs, because there will always be warning signs that your battery is having issues. And the reason why I wanted to discuss this is because of an article I seen in Reddit or somewhere. I think it was Reddit. But anyway, to me, I don't know. I feel like this guy, well, let me just read you his story, okay? And this is the story. And hopefully, I don't know, I don't want the guy to catch feelings, but obviously he put it out here in the public forum, so he wanted some answers, so we're going to talk about this. So this is his story. Last night I woke up to a loud explosion coming from my garage. It sounded like fireworks. I went into my garage and my electric bike was on fire. Sparks were flying everywhere and the smell of burning plastic was unbearable. I managed to put the fire out with a garden hose. My neighbor called the fire department. According to the fire department, electric bike fires are not uncommon. If I wasn't home to put the fire out, it certainly would have caught the rest of my home on fire. Why did it catch fire? I'm hesitant to build another bike without figuring out what went wrong. Only one battery caught fire. The other battery is still functioning, which is surprising after it had been soaked in water. I had two unit pack power batteries. One battery was 54 volts and the other 58 volts. I had these batteries wired in series, making it 112 volts. The battery that caught fire kept turning off. This also happened when the battery was not wired in series. I figured out the BMS was turning the battery off. Charging the battery for a few days fixed the issue. While riding around with both batteries in series, I noticed that the battery that caught fire was getting noticeably hot, but the other battery had a normal temperature. After leaving the bike charging for a few days, that's when the fire started. I'm unsure of why the fire started. Your thoughts and opinions are greatly appreciated. Well, I don't mean to laugh at or scoff at that, but it seems to me like this guy had several warning signs that, his battery is having problems. For one thing, he said that his battery kept turning on and off. That right there means your battery is having an issue, okay? Whatever the case may be. He also said that he had two batteries wired in series, which wiring them in series or parallel is fine. As long as you're using, proper gauge wires and good connectors. There's no issue that makes wiring a battery in series going to cause it to explode or, cause a fire. That had nothing to do with it, in my opinion. He said that one of the batteries was getting hot and the other one had normal temperature. Okay, to me, that is another sign that that particular battery was having a problem. He said it right there. One was hot, one was fine. and the one that was hot is the one that caught on fire. All right. He also said that he thought it was the BMS that kept turning the battery on and off. Probably so. And he said to fix that issue, he would leave the battery on charge for several days. Okay? And that fixed the issue. All right. Okay. So let's go over the reason why his battery was cutting on and off was just like he said. The BMS was probably shutting it down because most likely one of his stages was, the voltage was off. All right, so it would shut it down. So he said leaving it charging for several days fixed the issue because most likely one of those stages, the voltage was very low on it because most likely there was a bad cell or two in that particular stage, and by leaving them charging for an extended length of time probably eventually got those bad cells to come up to the right level. So therefore the BMS was reading all the voltages properly, and it stayed on at that point. However, he still had bad cells in that pack. He was just tricking the BMS by leaving it charging so long that the voltage probably came up on it. All right. At the same time, I'm sure leaving it charging for all that time, that battery was probably getting noticeably hot and warm. In fact, the day that it caught fire, he said it had been on charge for a couple of days. So that means just like he said, this guy thought that was curing this problem. So he would leave his battery charging for an extended amount of time because he thought that was, doing it some good, balancing it out. After a while, that thing caught on fire. So, man, this guy had all kinds of signs, and he ignored them all, and he was very lucky. All right? Now, okay, first of all, I'm going to state that I don't know everything when it comes to BMSs and what they're exactly supposed to do. So I'm going to speak about what I do know, okay? Now, each BMS has module on it, well, not a module, a connector, where that connector has several wires on it, all right, depending on the size of your battery. So let's say like a 20S battery. A 20S battery, that BMS is going to have a connector on it that has most likely 21 little individual wires on it, okay? One of those wires is going to go to the main battery voltage, the entire battery voltage. The other wire is going to go to the ground, and the wires in between are going to go to each stage of that battery. Meaning, if that's a 20S battery, behind the 1S stage, there's going to be a wire. Behind the 2S stage, there's going to be a wire. Behind the 3S, and so forth. That battery is going to have that BMS is going to have a wire going to each particular stage of that 20S battery. All right. Let's look at this old raggedy junk battery to kind of give you an example. Now, you also have to remember that in a 20S battery, that particular battery is going to have so many cells in parallel. Let's say it's a 20S 10P. That means there are 20 groups of batteries in series, okay? And each one of those groups, the 10P, has 10 cells in parallel, okay? 20 stages in series, 10 cells in parallel in each stage. So in parallel means all 10 of those batteries, the positives and negatives are going to be tied together. You know, they're going to act as one battery because they're all connected. At the end of their stage, that one battery, as they're all being connected, there's going to be a wire coming from that stage that goes to the BMS. If that's the first stage, then the BMS will be reading that stage somewhere from 3.6 volts up to 4.2 fully charged, and it can even go lower than that. A cell can go below 3.6, that's the nominal voltage. It can go down to 3 volts, whatever, and go up to 4.5 volts, way over the charge, but fully charged at that point. 4.2 is the maximum full charge voltage. All right, so there will be a range in that 1S stage from anywhere from, it could be 0 volts if you got a bad cell, 0 volts up to the ceiling of that first stage, and that ceiling should be around 4.2, should be fully charged, but it can exceed that, so let's say 4.5. So most BMSs read each stage up to about 4.5 volts. If that stage exceeds 4.5 volts, the BMS is supposed to shut down. That means that stage is overcharging and it's reached its maximum ceiling, and it's going to cut the charge side of that BMS down so it cannot overcharge anymore. The main reason why a lot of 18650s blow up, or explode or go into thermal runaway is because they are overcharged. I mean, if you look at the energy storage in one of these, you can look at it as a physical thing. Let's just say the volume of this battery. If you were stuffing particles inside of this battery, it can only contain whatever, the full volume of this battery is. Let's just say that's physical. And if you exceed that, this battery would start swelling up and expanding because you're stuffing it. So I want you to look at it in that way. So once it's overcharged, once it reaches 4.2 is where it should be, but all manufacturers give a little bit of leeway, a little bit of room to breathe. So they have the BMSs set about 4.5. If this battery gets to 4.5, that stage of the BMS is supposed to shut it down so it cannot exceed that. Trying to stuff more volts into this battery is going to cause it, if it was physically stuffing it, it would rupture. Same thing with electricity. Putting too much voltage and capacity into this battery is going to cause it to overheat. And once it overheats, that lithium is going to explode and catch fire. Okay? All right, so you got that point. So, like I said, a 20S battery, if you notice, and yeah, this battery looks terrible because this is part of the battery that was left in that moped bike that I got, and it's been sitting out in the weather forever and ever. This thing is completely dead. These cells aren't any good, but I'm using it for visual. So, if you notice, the end of these have a little metal piece, a tab off the end. That's where the BMSs connect to these little tabs. And as we were talking about stages, 1P, 2P, 3P, and parallel, you notice a whole bunch of them. This is an 8P battery because they have 8 batteries in parallel. 8 of these batteries are all connected together, positives and negatives. Okay, so it's an 8P. All right, so one thing I want to tell you is that BMSs don't measure each individual cell. If they did, it would be a million wires going to that connector, because if you got a battery that has 200 cells in it, if they read each battery individually, it would be 200 wires going to that BMS. but they don't read them individually. They read them as a group. So if it's a 10p battery, those 10 cells are being read as one entire group. Meaning if there's a dead battery in that group, the BMS is not going to be able to pick that out. It's not going to be able to say there's one bad battery in that cell group. It's going to be eventually, if enough of those cells go dead in that group, it's going to cause that entire group's voltage to be off. Then at that point, the BMS will shut down. If all the rest of the stages are reading 3.9 volts and that fourth stage, the 4P stage, is reading 3.2 volts, then that means there's a problem in that fourth stage. But normally it's going to take one or more of these to go bad to throw that voltage off. So you can have a totally dead cell in a 8P battery, and only that one cell is bad. Hey, how you doing? Yeah, so let me stop this for a second. All right, guys, we are back. I'm sorry about that. Unfortunately, yeah, I'm outside in the backyard and the trash guys came, so yeah, I stopped it for a minute. But back to what I was saying, man. That's the only thing. If you got, you know, a lot of people think that the BMS can decipher, you know, each cell individually and it's balancing all of the cells. And that is not correct, because it only has one wire going to that stage, and in that stage, depending on whatever, however many P it is, 8P, 10P, 12P, that's how many batteries are tied together. So like I'm saying, if there's one, look at it like this. Let's just say one battery goes bad in this 8P. And whatever stage that's in, whether it's first stage, second stage, I say a 4P. So in the fourth stage, if one battery was to go bad in the fourth stage, out of those 8 cells, this one battery is not, you know, reaching its full charge at 4.2. It can only get up to 3.5 volts, and it can't go any higher than that. For whatever reason, something's breaking down inside of this battery. Whatever the problem is, the rest of these batteries that can charge up to 4.2 are trying to hold this battery up. You know, even if that was like physically, imagine if them physically, if they were all standing up and this battery was trying to fall down, and that weight was going to be on the rest of those batteries trying to hold this guy up. You know, eventually the guy next to him, he would get tired and start falling down. Then they're trying to hold 2 guys up, and that spreads like a disease. You know what I mean? So at the same time, these guys that aren't functioning properly, because their batteries, they start getting hot. And the only way you'll be able to decipher that is if you have something like this, a thermal heat gun, and you check your battery, you know, all over to see if there's a problem, if there's an individual cell heating up. But you're not going to know it if it's just one cell. You're not going to know that. So BMSs can't protect you fully. You know what I mean? You got one bad cell in that pack. You could be riding for weeks with that one cell being bad, and eventually it's going to get worse and worse and worse. Eventually this one cell that had dropped down to 3.6 volts is down around 1 volt, and at that point you got 7 of the other cells trying to keep this bad battery up to 4.2 volts. So it's going to be a lot of current flow in this 4-piece section. And this whole 4-piece section is going to start heating up, you know. And it's like a cancer. At that point, when you got 2 or more bad cells, like I said, it's going to start dragging that voltage down. So the BMS by that time can tell, okay, on the 4th piece stage, all the rest of the batteries at whatever point in the charging you're in, all the rest of the stages are at 3.9. The 4-piece stage is at 3.6. There's a problem. BMS shuts it down. All right? And it won't charge anymore. Now, at the same time, that always won't happen in time before, you know, there's a fire or something, you know. We can only hope that the BMS detects that, and that's only after a couple of these cells have went bad in that pack, in that stage. You know what I mean? Sometimes one of these cells, when it goes bad and it overheats, can short completely. If one of these cells short completely, there will be no voltage on that stage at all. That 4th stage will be reading 0 volts. And the BMS is supposed to shut it off. Notice I say suppose. Now, the reason why I'm saying suppose is that just like there are cheap batteries, there are cheap tools, there are cheap everything, there are cheap BMSs also. Your battery pack can be a cheap battery pack with a cheap BMS, and that cheap BMS may not be doing what it's supposed to do efficiently. You can't put your trust and hopes in a cheap BMS failing. That BMS is supposed to read that battery voltage from, you know, like I say, 0 to 4.5, the ceiling at each stage. But that BMS could have an issue, whereas though it doesn't know that it's at 4.5. You know, that battery could be at 4.9, but a faulty BMS is only reading it at 4.4. For whatever reason, you know, another component in that BMS is failing. You know, bad resistor, bad diode, bad capacitor, something failing where that BMS is not functioning properly. So I'm not trying to scare you. I'm just saying that shit happens, and a lot of times no one is at fault. And the only way you can avoid that is by paying close attention to what's happening. Now, that is why when you're charging your bike, you should never leave your battery alone charging. You shouldn't put your bike on charge and go to the store. You shouldn't put your bike on charge at night while you're sleeping. Your bike should be charging while you're up in the day and can monitor and pay attention. You know, if you got your battery charging, every now and then go over it and, you know, feel your battery. Feel, is it getting hot anywhere? Is it heating up? Is it overheating? And yeah, it's going to get warm sometimes. You're not worried about warm. You're worried about hot. So if you feel something getting warm, just keep monitoring it. You know, you can always shut charging down or whatever's going on and stop it, you know, before it gets to that point where it's super duper hot that it's about to catch on fire. You know, anything can happen. That's all I'm saying. And do I trust the BMS completely? No, because it's an electronic component and everything fails. So all I'm saying is just be extra cautious. You may want to invest in one of these because this can catch what your hands and your eyes can't catch. You know, it's good to be able to go to your battery pack and shine this on it while it's charging. Make sure there's no parts heating up. And I'm going to tell you other stuff that can cause problems. All right. Like this, I told you, this came out that old bike, and you can see it's gotten wet, it's rusted. At the same time, if you look at some of these welding points on this, some of these welding points are real, shabby, where it's not making good connection with the battery. It may be like each of these welds, you can't see it, but I can see that each of these welds has like 4 welds on it. So let's just say 3 of those welds aren't making good connection, and only 1 weld is making a really good solid connection. That's going to cause some high resistance at this one cell. Meaning when you have a lot of current flowing through these nickel strips, it's because there's some resistance there, because it's not making good connection. This cell can be overheating just because of a bad loose connection. And there definitely are loose connections. Like if you look at this one right here, this one was just sitting on this cell, Now, can that be because it's all rusted up? Yeah. But I mean, can you have a bad connection like that without the rust? Sure you can. You can see where, some of these welds, they're terrible. If you notice, look at that. I pulled that right up off of there. But like I said, that's because this thing is old. It's got rust, and the rust has eaten up some of the, the weld connection. But like I say, that's not to say that a brand new battery with, no rust on it cannot have a bad connection. Humans make these, and well, sometimes there's machines that do it, but even machines are foolproof. Damn, that leaf scared the shit out of me. But yeah, man, everything is always not 100% foolproof. Shit happens. So pay attention to the warning signs. Man, that guy had all kinds of signs. His battery was shutting off, and he kept forcing it. He kept forcing charge on it. Then the damn thing was running hot. He ignored it running hot. He kept on using it. Then, not only that, he put it on charge and left it on charge for days. So, that particular incident, was kind of some of his own making. But sometimes it's not. And then sometimes people just don't know. You don't know. You're gonna continue to do what you think is right. And he thought leaving it on charge was balancing out his cells. The problem is, if there's a bad cell, you can't balance a bad cell. You're forcing it. You're trying to force the voltage to get to the correct level. Now, how accurate are BMSs? As far as where do they cut off at? They're not only supposed to cut off at the ceiling at 4.5 volts when it's over the 4.2. It's supposed to cut off if it drops too low. Now, I don't know what that is. It could be 2.5 volts. It could be 2 volts. Whatever it is, it's supposedly programmed into that BMS at whatever level where the voltage is too low, it's supposed to shut off. And I'm talking about on the charge side of the BMS. Same thing about on the discharge side. On the discharge side, the BMS is supposed to read how many volts is on the output, how much current is flowing through the output side of that battery, because like I said, there's the discharge side and there's the charge side. Either side of the BMS can go bad and it's going to shut down, whether the battery charges or whether the battery is outputting the voltage, But BMSs only do so much, and they do not read each cell individually. So people think that all the cells are being read individually. I just wanted to tell you that is not true. All right? So that's just a little discussion on BMSs and batteries, and you gotta do a little bit of extra things yourself as an e-biker to stay on top of stuff and make sure that you know, nothing is happening, like your battery's not overheating. And if it is, don't ignore it. You know, if there's an overheating problem, find out why it's overheating. You know, you may have to take the shrink wrap off your battery and physically look to see. It could be overheating, like I said, because of a bad connection, you know, or a bad weld spot. It could be anything, you know. On batteries, on these batteries on the top, the positive is so close to the negative. That's why they put those little stickers on top, because underneath of this plastic right here is the negative part of this battery around this outside. When you got those nickel strips going across the top, they can get hot enough to melt this little plastic barrier. If it melts that little plastic barrier, there's a dead short. That's why people put those little extra stickers. Those stickers are made of some type of insulation, you know, that it gives you another extra barrier in between that plastic and the anode and cathode, or the hot and negative side of your battery, man. So anyway, that's it. That's my talk. And you guys got to understand, when I do these talks or discussions, I'm not out here reading from a script. You know, I didn't write this shit down before I came out here inside to make a video. I come out here and I talk off the top of my head, and you know, I speak from the heart and from the gut. You know what I mean? So what I'm saying is not always 100%. I mean, what I'm saying is I misspeak sometimes. Like the other day, I was talking about the displays. It was a 750C, and I kept calling it a 760. So, you know, I'm human. I make mistakes on little shit like that. But yeah, this shit ain't scripted. It's straight off the top of my dome, and I'm giving you what information I have on this stuff, and to the best of my ability. Could I forgot something? Do I know it all? No, I don't. But I'm just, you know, telling you what I know from my experience, and yeah, there you have it. All right, y'all, take it easy, take care, deuces. We up out of here. This is a Crooked Finger production. You know who it is. We are OUT out. Peace.